Can you be vulnerable as a sixth sensory with five sensories? That is a really good question. And the thing about vulnerability is that as sixth sensories and sensitives, we tend to veer towards being more vulnerable than most people. And vulnerability can be potentially something that works for us. There is something to be said about the person who appears to always have it together and always has a perfect life, that they can be a little bit difficult to approach, a little bit hard to relate to, because they have such a hard edge to their personality that you're like, ooh, like, I don't know, like, can I really trust this person? Do they really have any heart? Do they really have any empathy? Or are they always just preaching what they think is right, you know, or what is wrong? And even in my talks, like, it's something that I'm learning about is how do you deliver messages with a lot of empathy? How do you teach people values, but without talking too much about right and wrong? Sometimes it's hard to avoid talking about right and wrong. It's like when you're looking at murder, there's probably a right and wrong to that, right? And you just want to be really careful when you're speaking in right and wrong, that you're being really clear and really empathetic, and you're taking into account people with different experiences. I believe one of the classic mistakes that old religions make, and there's so many good things that came from old religions, so I'm not criticizing, but one mistake they made that I think led to a lot of things like genocide and killing indigenous people and residential schools in North America. The problem is that they believe that they are right, and they are so right, and they are so justified in what they are doing, that they are right in committing really egregious, really horrible acts like murdering indigenous children. And so when people are that hardcore, that hard edge about right and wrong, where they are okay with killing people, that is not a good thing. I think the only time it's really appropriate to kill somebody is if they are directly attacking you, or directly attacking somebody like your child or your immediate family, and you need to protect yourself, right? But when we get really caught up in right and wrong in religion, sometimes we're so hardcore about enforcing it that we actually do damage and we do violence in the process of enforcing it. And that's where vulnerability and empathy is really important, to kind of take a step back sometimes and say, hey, this is not the way that I expected. It's not falling into my parameters of right and wrong, but maybe I shouldn't force or control the situation, because in trying to do so, I'm creating more harm. And that's where it gets very, very complicated. That's why I believe in so much in using your intuition. There are times where it's going to be very hard to discern what is the right or the wrong thing to do. We live in a very muddled society where people's norms and definitions of right and wrong are changing all of the time. People think it feels right to do what feels good. And so they may, date 5,000 people at the same time and hook up, and that feels good to them, whereas to your values and your moral system, that doesn't feel good. So you have to think about it and be discerning about who you're letting into your life. You want to have a hard enough edge of discipline that you're not letting in riffraff. And there is a lot of riffraff out in society today. It doesn't mean you have to be scared of it. Doesn't mean you have to be a hater and be like, oh, everybody sucks and I hate the dating culture and stuff. You don't have to be negative about it, because that puts up red flags that you're kind of not doing so well in that area of your life. And that's not the message you want to send out. You want to be a little bit more sophisticated than that, a little bit more discerning than that, to say, hey, there is stuff going on. I don't have to participate in it if I don't want to. And I can be vulnerable enough to say so and say, hey, this is the type of person I am, and maybe I don't really fit in. Maybe I'm intuitive and I feel things from spirit. I'm very sensitive, and my body doesn't feel good unless I feel extremely safe with somebody, and it takes a while. And when you're vulnerable like that, I think that's when it works with the five sensory. They get a real picture of who you are as a sixth sensory. And they want someone who can be easy to hang out with, easy to get along with. Maybe we're different, but we don't fight about things. Like five sensories can easily fight with other five sensories, by the way, because even though they're all five sensory, they're all logical and left brain. You'd think they'd be the same, but they're actually not, because five sensories form all of their left brains very differently according to their upbringing. So one might be Muslim, one might be Christian, or one might be Anglican versus Catholic versus United Church, and even these little sects between the churches, there can be big differences and big fights. That's why they all developed in the first place. And so left brain people fight with each other all the time. So even though as a sixth sensory, we're a different kind of person, we live through our intuition, we feel things very deeply, we're very sensitive, and five sensories may not experience the world the same way. They may like us because we're calm and peaceful, and we're not going to create fights the way other five sensories who are very idealistic will create fights. And so we can actually get along and pair very beautifully. However, how much vulnerability should you show them? Give them what they've earned from you, and give it to them in bite sizes, one little piece at a time. And you have to be really mindful and really discerning. The more you think about the future and the more romantically carried away you become as a sixth sensory, the more likely you are subconsciously going to push a five sensory away without even realizing it. You have to be extremely real in the moment and evaluating moment to moment, how good are they being? And the minute they're not being so good, I'm not saying you have to get rid of them, but don't reward them in moments when they're not behaving so good, even if it's very subtle bad behavior. It's okay to not respond, but don't reinforce them positively for behavior that's even subtly bad, because then that becomes like a permission slip for them to get more and more and more badly behaved. And so you have to be extremely mindful and extremely careful about that with your vulnerability. So give it to people who have really earned it. They've really taken care of you, made you feel secure, made you feel good as a person, and really value and respect your opinions. And then your vulnerability is going to be appreciated, but don't give it away unconsciously, because our emotional vulnerability, I believe, is actually more valuable than our physical intimacy or physical vulnerability, even though that's valuable too, but it's our spirit, it's our deepest selves, and we don't want to give it away to just anybody.